Shadowversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and I want to discuss the concept, the idea of using magic in large-scale warfare, because it's a bit different when you consider battles on a large scale compared to the adventuring party. And when you really think about it, there are some really cool opportunities to employ magic in unique, creative ways, and also use them in ways that perhaps people haven't necessarily thought of. It changes the game completely because it would also change warfare in really significant ways. Now, this is such an expansive topic and a broad topic that I'll never be able to cover every single part of it, all right? Magic can do anything that the writer wants to say it can do, all right? But if you have a strict, or not even strict, but a defined set of rules, even rules that still allow magic doing really incredible and a vast number of things, really anything, you can still understand and then explore within that framework to get a good idea of how, to the extent that magic would be used in such, types of applications. Now, when considering the type of magic, we will be coming to the kind of idea between soft magic and hard magic, because once you know what the magic can do, that's when we can really explore how you would employ it in warfare. And considering the hard magic and soft magic, I would suggest my video on hard magic and soft magic systems, because I think the definition can sometimes be a little bit misunderstood. I feel soft magic is magic that generally can do anything, but not necessarily the characters who use it. For instance, in Harry Potter, the magic can really do anything, but it's only restricted by what the characters know or are capable of performing with it, and they have to learn new spells, and same with Wheel of Time and things. I mentioned this in the video, but go in further detail. And then hard magic systems are magic systems that are restricted in what they can do far more. I feel both have rules, and you establish what the rules are by showing what it can do. When you show the magic does something, you're saying the magic can do X. And so once you have that framework, you can then try and discuss how would it really be employed. One of the first things that I think you would need to consider is how prevalent the magic is. If everyone can do it, or if a large number of people, or if it's only one special individual, kind of like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I know Gandalf's not the only one, but effectively for the group that, are adventuring and stuff, Gandalf's the only magic user. If you're creating a story, any story really, this is for role-playing applications, or just if you're a writer, world builder of any type, you need to be very mindful of really all the possible applications that your players or individuals' characters would do when you introduce even just one spell, not just the whole magic system. Because I've seen cases where one spell, effectively is doing one thing, but then there are so many drastic applications for that one spell that would be really, really useful. And one of the examples I want to give is like the magical opening door that lets you travel to another location. That has significant, crazy applications in a combative sense, and especially on a large-scale battlefield. So instead of being able to explore every possible thing in magic that you could do in battlefields, I'm going to be giving certain examples that hopefully will illustrate the concept of thinking outside the box. What else would you be able to do the magic in terms of warfare, and talk about ways I feel is helpful in approaching it. So one of the best examples that I can give of using the magical door opening effectively in new ways, but also especially how it would be used in large-scale warfare, are some examples that I'll be referencing from the book series, The Wheel of Time. It's one of my favorite book series. I have the whole series right there. Amazon's actually making a TV series that will be released very soon. I'm hesitant, but hopeful. Hopefully it'll be good. But I really recommend you checking out the book series, because these uses of magic and in warfare happen in the later books. I'm going to be avoiding spoilers as much as I can, just describing how the magic is used, not who's using it, when it is and things. But I really recommend checking out the entire Wheel of Time series for its use of magic in creative ways and in warfare. And there is a way that you can actually dive right into it, starting out for free, because luckily enough, this video is sponsored by Audible. And all you need to do is go to www.audible.com/Shadowversity, or if you're in the US, you text Shadowversity to 500-500. You sign up for the first 30 days and get your first audiobook for free. Grab Wheel of Time. They're big chunky books, and there's a lot of them, but they're so good. There's some of the, I really think in terms of quality of story, character development, everything, fantasy literature has the best, okay? The books are better, and one of the easiest ways to absorb them is listening to them on audiobook. You can do it while you're driving, while you're cooking, while you're doing any number of things, and I end up enjoying them so much that I just end up listening to them on the couch. It's one of the great entertainment mediums of the modern day. If you haven't tried it already, I really recommend you do. And not only do you get that access to the audiobook, your monthly subscription gives you a credit to get any audiobook you want, and that credit is a lot cheaper than the retail cost of these audiobooks. I'm not kidding. So you can get the entire Wheel of Time series at a fraction of the price. And then on top of that, your subscription, and you get access to this in the first 30 days for free, you get access to the Audible Plus catalog, which enables you to enjoy full audiobooks, not using a monthly credit. You get this with your subscription, and the first month is free, so you can enjoy a special curated selection of audiobooks, but not just audiobooks, self-help books, sleep tracks, podcasts. Just go to www.audible.com/Shadiversity, or if you're in the US, you text Shadiversity to 500-500. You'll open up a whole new world of entertainment and story, like such great story and characters that other entertainment mediums, especially TV and film, they honestly rarely even come close to how great they are, and Wheel of Time is one of the best. You could also check out my audiobook, Chronicles of Everfall, Shadow of the Conqueror, Unique Uses of Magic as well. It's such good value, you're missing out if you're not enjoying audiobooks. And even better, right now for a limited time, Audible is doing a special holiday deal where you can save 60% off your first 3 months of Audible. That is only $5.95 a month, and you get access to some of the greatest stories ever told in one of the most enjoyable methods, having these stories read to you with a great, engaging narrator. So it's really great that Audible is sponsoring this video. Thank you to them. And so now I want to discuss some of these specific ways that Wheel of Time uses cool magic in warfare. So Wheel of Time has the portal opening magic. That kind of spell is used in a lot of things. In fact, we even see it in like the MCU, the sorcerers, Doctor Strange using the whole portal opening thing. And in the MCU, they are using it poorly, in my opinion, because that type of magic can do drastic, incredible things and actually show it do something the same that's in the MCU and Wheel of Time, yet in Wheel of Time, they latch onto it and you start to use it in creative ways. And what it is when the portal closes, it can chop off people's limbs or anything caught in the way. We see this happen in Infinity War. One of those portals closed, chop off a limb. Well, there's a point in Infinity War where they needed to get something off someone's hand, and they were really struggling to disarm the thing from the person's hand when Doctor Strange had access to those portals, which we saw could cut off people's... could have been useful. Just saying. Well, in Wheel of Time, it shows, like, all throughout, that if you are caught in the way of this door opening, it will slice you in two, cleaner than a razor, like the cleanest cut ever, right? And, of course, if you're caught in the door as it closes as well. Well, they not only realize that this happens, then they start to use it against people and in warfare, to the point where there's this adaptation of the spell, where they have this opening and shutting magical portal door that happens really, really fast and can move through swaths of the enemy, slicing them to bits. Like, yeah, it's a really useful spell, and you could use it drastically in battle. You could also just open up portals underneath people, drop them through, and they're going to be falling from any height. Right? That is such an unbelievably potent, like, large-scale spell. Because people usually think portals, they're not, like, battle combative. They're not firing fireballs at people or shooting lightning. But in actual fact, they have the capacity to affect large-scale armies far greater than a single lightning bolt ever could. Like, imagine if you could funnel your enemy down through a position, they're either charging or they're turning around a corner and they can't see or something like that, and you open up a portal underneath them, which then teleports them several hundred meters in the sky, and they just fall to their death, and you can take out a massive amount of army right there. Also, depending on the size, because can you change, the volume of what you can push through these portals. So usually they're restricted by size, but the larger you can make it, the more it can affect an army. A really interesting way that they use them in Wheel of Time is that they open up a portal above an enemy's position, and then they use it to look at what the enemy is doing in real time. It's like a video feed to see the enemy's position. That is unbelievably useful. Like, the entire battles have shifted in their ability to win, lose, right, based on information. Where is the enemy at X time. You can defeat an enemy by flanking them at the right time, catching them unawares. Do you have, soldiers hidden in a certain area, okay, like amongst trees and stuff? In the Battle of Agincourt, a lot of the archers were actually hidden amongst the trees on the sides of the field and were able to shoot into the French cavalry, okay? So positioning is great, and the French knew that, oh, there are more archers off to the side, and they could determine that with a viewed down position. Wow. Massively so, especially seeing, a position of an enemy or opponent behind ridge lines and things. So just information, using those portals for information, it was brilliant. And so I really love that there's this thinking outside the box that happens with Wheel of Time. And this is just one example, one spell, but there are so many other ones. One of the common types of magic that we see employed in large-scale warfare is Necromancy, because raising up lots and lots of, undead, and it's usually done by evil people. It's like there's an unspoken Geneva Convention or something like that saying, you're not allowed to use necromancy, but if you're evil, you don't care and you just do it anyway. But I wonder if people could kind of give their consent, especially in a battlefield scenario. It's like, look, I consent for you to use my body upon my death, raise me up as a zombie or something to fight the enemy. And it would very much depend on how the rules would operate in world, okay? Would your soul still be okay if your body is raised? Is the body just a husk and your soul is fine in the afterlife and it's just possessed by some dark force? But does it have to be a dark force? I don't know, could you get good forces? Could there be good uses of necromancy? But what this more largely brings up is kind of the overall world consensus of what is appropriate in warfare and what isn't. Because we see in the modern day that there are some things that are considered inappropriate. And of course, Geneva Convention is an example. And if magic is so prevalent, can do such drastically horrible things, not just in necromancy, there might be things considered too far, and there be large rules over what can really be used. Now, of course, in a fantasy setting, maybe it'd be harder to enforce, and when you're dealing with gross evil that don't care about rules, it's a bit different, but there are interesting complexities and dynamics you could add into a story that could cover some things like that. Like fireball's okay, but napalm or magic that makes something effectively like napalm, it's a little too much. But many people have used napalm-like equivalents in even modern-day warfare, but something that has been largely frowned upon is chemical warfare, okay? And that's the type of thing that magic, like in D&D, you have essentially chemical warfare that can create poisonous clouds of some noxious fumes and things. That's a horrifyingly dangerous and even potentially effective spell that could be applied in a warfare scenario, so much so that it could be banned or attempted to be banned by the good guys or people that are trying to do a more civilized, if you can call it that, type of warfare. But magical-based chemical warfare would be horrifying, truly horrifying. And because with D&D like magic and, Dungeons & Dragons or in the settings that use D&D magic and stuff, there's a lot of large-scale warfares, but how many people are using the applications of those spells like just death cloud, right? You also have to be careful about magic being too overpowered, and so I'd say giving magic certain limitations or even weaknesses could be very, very important. I have a video exploring that, and it's framed around the discussion of how could a knight be effective in a world with magic, but it's a larger discussion of non-magic users versus magic users and the possible limitations or strengths, weaknesses that you could employ in a setting to make it a bit more balanced. Because if magic is very common, prominent, and effective, well, one of the large differences is entire armies made up of magic users. They could have backup melee-like weapons, but magic is extremely... Even if, the magic was as simple as throwing fireballs or some type of magical energy projectile, that's incredible. It's effectively a gun, and depending on how prominent and effective it is, well, the gun developed to the point of being so effective that other types of warfare and melee types of combat was phased out completely. Not saying it happened right away, but it eventually did. And magic can give certain armies or even individuals offensive capacity that is very comparable to modern day technology. And if you're operating in the realm of this is almost pushed to modern day warfare equivalent, well, the average knight and his sword probably isn't going to be very prominent in that setting either. You would have entire troops armed with their fireball spell and perhaps a big shield or something to try and protect from the other magical projectiles. Because this is the other thing. Fireball is a type of spell that usually explodes. So that's like a bazooka, right? We're talking about very modern warfare equivalent types of warfare and combat here. And how would it be employed? Have a look how they're employed in modern warfare, except the difference is you could arm every single person in your army, if it's a common enough spell, to have a bazooka shooting out of one hand. And if that's the case, shields and armor isn't going to do spit. So as a result, you probably would see vastly less armor if it doesn't protect people and then it just weighs them down. Barely anyone would be wearing armor or shields. And if that's the case, like if you're dealing with people that are shooting explosive projectiles, the classic kind of troop formation way that warfare was conducted would be done away with as well, all right? As soon as we get, well, not as soon, but when gunfire, artillery and things come in, warfare changed from troop units moving, you know, in these specific formations to like trench warfare and things, because bullet fire is just so darn dangerous, as well as being shelled and such. But that's what you can effectively achieve with magic fireballs and things. And so people on the battlefield will not be running in unit formations, they'd be spread out, apart. And there would be mad rushes to try and get to them or shoot back at them with your own fireballs and stuff. And so the regular unit formations, I would not see them existing in a world with very offensive magical capacity. You'd almost see things like trench warfare and modern day tactics of cover, moving, flanking, rushing positions and stuff. And we've only been talking about if most of your soldiers could be armed with a fireball equivalent spell, which is like a bazooka, let alone crazy things like portals that can open and slice people in half, make them fall from crazy heights, magical based chemical warfare, like that type. Like if you had prevalent magical chemical warfare, you wouldn't be seeing a lot of people on the battlefield for how dangerous it would be. Because now we come into another side of it, is types of magical protection. Because that, like in the medieval period, we see almost an arms race between offensive and defensive technology, okay? Projectiles, bolts, arrows becoming more powerful. Let's get the armor even stronger. Okay, the armor got stronger, or things got stronger here, and back and forth. Well, that would happen in a magical setting, drastically so. Oh, chemical death cloud magic? Well, now we have like a bubble of breathing around a person's mouth or their body and things to protect them, which could almost nullify that completely, which could phase out and make that type of offensive magic not used, but still around. And so it's like in their backup. If they see an opening where they're not protecting or giving themselves a breathing bubble, then it would be there ready to be used. Because these are the ways that it's really fun to develop your magic system. Establish rules, counters, but don't forget something if it contradicts something or overcomes or fixes something, because if you take away that condition, it's still useful, it's still there. And so you need to remember what the magic is doing and how you're extrapolating these ideas further. Now, you could just say in your magic system that the defensive capacity isn't as prominent as its offensive powers. And so make the rules, tell what you can do. But if you have magical shields that can block against fireballs and death clouds and other things like that, well, guess what? You actually might be bringing the good old sword and knight back into the mainstream. You might even return to the troop movement stuff if you could protect them adequately to the point where very little magic is capable of penetrating these protective barriers, and you have to walk through them or have a weapon that actually can pass through and hit them completely. But does it block weapons as well? Because if you have really strong shields, well, then you need to change how you could defeat them completely. The portals might still work if you can open up something underneath them and they fall through. Like, I can't really see how a magical barrier could protect them, because the magical barrier is usually locked to you and you move with it. And so that wouldn't really stop you from falling through a hole, and it wouldn't really stop you from falling through a portal either. Would it stop portals opening up within the shield? Maybe it could do that, but opening up the portal outside that you fall through, all right? How do you defend against it? What about earthquake magics, all right? What if you could get the earth to just jolt up really suddenly in this like big earthquake-like attack, but only briefly? But if it jolts up by a meter or two, and you can launch people like a springboard, 10, 20 meters in the air, you could effectively kill an entire army if you could get that earthquake effect to happen just briefly, but over a large enough area. And if their troops are like that, they're dead. But again, magical counters. What about, as a classic spell in D&D, Featherfall? You cast and you fall softly, right? So this is the fun thing to consider. If there's any offensive use of magic, there might be a defensive use that could fix it or be employed. So that's what you need to consider for your own magic system. What is available, what's the attack, what's the offensive use, and what's a possible defensive use, if at all, and does it outweigh one another? Because if you have magic that is more offensive with very little defensives, that's when you need to consider, all right, how is this going to affect combat, large-scale warfare? And we've explored some interesting ways here, just to give an example, because we can't cover everything. But then you could have it the opposite way, where the defensive magic is even higher, and that could bring it back into more traditional warfare that's blocking it. But remember, you would only have the defensive magics, per se, if you had the offensive ones around as well. And so if you had such more powerful defensive magic that can block, you know, the chemical attacks, the fireballs, lightning bolts, maybe even protect them against other things like earthquakes and portal openings and things, that would then usually evolve to melee-type weapons. But then if there's a way to make the magical shield fail, it's like, oh, there's an opening, now we can lob the fireballs. And that could be one of the challenges, the conflicts in the story, to circumvent or deactivate the magical shield that is so effective. Because what is causing it? Is there a special magical gem focusing the energy, protecting it, or are these individual spells that the individual soldiers are making to create a protective shield that protects them? Is there an anti-magic type of thing? Go look at the video where I talk about knights versus wizards, because we talk about lots of ways in which magic could have weaknesses to be circumvented that you could then employ in a large scale, and it creates conflict. It means, all right, to do this, we need to achieve X, okay? Like, we need to either get them into an anti-magic field, ingest something that nullifies their magic, or touch something, or any number of things, and these are great conflicts that the characters need to work through to achieve something. And when you have, like, defined rules that the characters need to work within, it means the results are very satisfying, because the reader receives it as being justified. Yes, it works. And then if they can do it in creative ways that the reader wasn't expecting, but when they see it, it makes sense in the rules, it can be incredibly satisfying as a result. You know, one of the types of magic that I feel is wholly underutilized and has such unbelievable, devastating uses, especially in warfare? It's illusion magic. Now, illusion magic, especially like in Dungeons and Dragons and other things, can be unbelievable. If you want an example of a fantasy that actually employs types of illusion magic, it's in the Stormlight Archives. There's a character called Shalon who can actually make magical illusions, and it's really interesting what she does, even in large-scale warfare, to employ that magic. So there's great examples, and again, if you're wanting to dive into some of these great books, you can get it through the Audible sponsorship. Really suggested. Now, illusion, imagine what you can do, right? You can make entire illusion, like, depending on the scale. If you can do even moderate scale, like a unit of troops, 12, 50, 100, it depends on the scale. But if you could make an illusion of entire troop of, you know, of your army, an additional one, you could get your enemy to move away, think their numbers, you could manipulate them in so many advantageous ways, get them to even retreat perhaps at some times. What if it was like a low-scale illusion? And this is one of the crazy ones. What if you could make an illusion of a bridge over a thing? Granted, it would only work on the first few people, because after they see them falling, they might get the idea. But if they're charging and they're all really, you could actually wipe out a fairly sizable number of the enemy by making an illusion of surface over a pit. But what if you did it in multiple ways? What if you had like a field and you got to prepare it and you made pits everywhere and just illusion over top? It's like traps with that covering over top, but you don't need to go to the additional trouble. What about an illusion that just makes you look bigger and stronger to intimidate the enemy? Illusion is such an incredible, useful spell that has applications in warfare that I rarely ever get seen. And that's why it was so refreshing to see it in Stormlight Archives used in some really fun, cool ways. And this comes to another, like, unbelievably potent application of magic. And that's magic that can affect the emotions or even mind of an individual, especially if you're able to take it to the large scale. All right? Wars were usually won not necessarily by wiping out the entire enemy, but getting them to break and retreat. And that just means breaking morale. So a fear spell would be insane. Now, what's crazy is the fear spell in D&D is one of the lowest level spells. Granted, you know, you need to be higher level to be able to overcome the person's will save, but if the enemy army is just made of mostly grunts, essentially low level, a fear spell that can affect a certain area would be unbelievably potent in a warfare application, like in a battlefield application. That's crazy. And especially if you can get it even further, like, because there are even mind control spells. Oh yeah, I'll just take over, mind control that group or enemy over there. And this is the type of magic that could be banned, you know? Like, it's almost on the necromancy kind of scale. But these applications are unbelievably potent, and it's just kind of funny when you think about this and consider that some of these spells are very low-level spells in D&D. In actual fact, I'm going to get the D&D book out. 3.5 Player's Handbook, classic, all right? I just want to look through some of the low-level spells and see which ones would, if you extrapolate this further, have far more devastating application on the large scale. Now, D&D is a unique kind of thing because effectively anyone can be a magic user, but that's in character creation. I think in-world, only people who have access to magic, you know, the right stats or whatever, but are born with it, can really touch the magic. But still, it seems like so many people can. And if it's to the point that anyone can learn magic, magic is so much more powerful in certain applications that most of the soldiers would be magic users or a hybrid, and it would only be with greater protective spells or something like that. You would bring it back to melee kind of stuff. Again, magic versus, you know, knights and stuff. A 0-level sorcerer wizard spell, Daze, humanoid creature of 4 HD or less, loses next action. All right? Imagine if the front line of an army, right, they were all able to cast Daze collectively against their opponent, and to the point where they lose their action. That could give the people who utilize it such an advantage that, like, losing an action, that's essentially a free attack almost. It could shift the course of an entire battle. Mage Hand, alright? Mage Hand, it's only £5 telekinesis, really. Have you heard of a flechette, okay? These are like metal spikes that were actually dropped from planes in World War I, right? But they're not that heavy, yet they can get the velocity to have great penetrative power. And if you could have Mage Hand, just raise them high enough and get enough people, just raise a whole heap of flechettes, like essentially kind of like weighted bolts, to the limit that they're able to use the telekinesis, and have the enemy move into position and just drop them. Again, like applications, right? First level sorcerer spell, like shield, that would be a very common. I think, you know, everyone just, you know, grab a shield spell if you can cast it. Mount. Summons a riding horse for 2 hours a level. Like, cavalry, extremely potent on the medieval battlefield. And now, I'm not saying that you could have spells that could counteract, but if you're saying that normal, like, medieval style combat was still very effective and employed, and you had like people that could summon cavalry, you mean you wouldn't have to, like, raise the horse, feed them, take them with you, deal with all the issues that taking cavalry has, right? And also, horses are expensive, and you're saying you could field an entire army with a horse when they need it, instantly with a spell that just gives everyone a horse for like 2 hours at a time? And you could have your entire army. Now, I'm not saying cavalry can't be defeated. There are many cases where they were, but there are many instances where cavalry was devastating, and you could give everyone a horse? Just as easy as it's a level 1 spell. Oh my goodness. True Strike plus 20 on the next attack. Like an instant hit attack. All the frontline soldiers just cast True Strike. Wipe out the front line of the enemy all collectively in this one hit, or at least do damage against them, okay? Remember, you win battles by getting the enemy to break morale. And if they suddenly, everyone on the front line gets severely injured or killed instantly, that could be devastating. And you could have almost like, you know, rows and volleys of True Strike, where everyone casts True Strike, bang, wipe out. And then they move back, and the next time they're fighting, everyone casts True Strike. So I've always felt that was like an OP spell. Like in normal D&D adventuring, it's not really OP, but employed on scale, like over a large volume, that's a crazy spell. Charm Person, level 1. All right, everyone just cast Charm Person. Get the entire front row of the enemy to just be your friend. Would they join your side? Maybe, but they'd get them to stop attacking. Oh gosh. Sleep. Look, they wake up when they're attacked, but if you put someone to sleep and then just, like, kill them instantly, the classic in 3.5 was the coup de grace move, where you could, you know, give it an attack, and I think it's a save versus, a saving throw versus death, or they die. Right, oh my goodness. What are you thinking, Oz? You were laughing.
Oh, it's just like Charm Person, and diplomacy could resume.
Silent Image. This is like a level 1 spell. Create a minor, you know, illusion of your design. But if, like, you had enough people that can cast a spell that's even just a still image, no sound, but at distance, they're visible, you could effectively make your army look twice as large as it is. Now, this is kind of in the realms of everyone in the army being able to cast a spell, and so this really comes to the fact of how prominent or common is the magic, how many people in the army, is the entire army capable of just casting one level? Give them one level in Sorcerer or Wizard. They can just cast a couple of prissy spells, right? And they would be insanely effective if you had enough people doing it collectively. Cause fear. Gosh. Enlarge person, where you can double the size. These are all level 1 spells. Oh my goodness. Web fills a 20-foot radius spread with sticky webs that makes them unable to move. Like if you could web an entire army and then just pepper them with arrows from a distance, that's level 2, granted. Blur attacks miss subject for 20% of the time. Blur your entire army. Invisibility! Oh my goodness, imagine if you could make like, not even an army, even 50, 60, like up to 100 men just invisible, get them to move position, the enemy can't see them, get onto a high position where, the high ground is actually effective in warfare, unlike one-on-one combat, vastly different one-on-one. Obi-Wan, I'm looking at you. But in warfare, having high ground is very advantageous, especially for ranged units. Invisible, entire archery unit, get them behind an enemy where they're not shields, they're hard to protect, and just even up to when you say close range, like as close as 50 feet or something, it's still far enough away they wouldn't be heard, and just offload. It's just, oh my goodness. Some of the ways that you can employ even essentially low-level magic as, look, I'm not saying D&D is a perfect example, it's just an example, but the type of magic that even Dungeons & Dragons, 3.5 the best. And I know Pathfinder is basically 3.5 enhanced and better, all right, I get it. But even the way that D&D defines low-level magic, the way you could employ it in warfare, oh boy, even just one, like if magic is so rare but you could just use one spell and not access all the other, even just some of these spells, just one use, enough of them being able to be used collectively, could tip the tide, the scales in the battle drastically. It's unbelievable. Conjuration spells, there's a fun one. Now, this is not just like being able to summon creatures to help battle you. What if you could just create big, large, because where does it be created? Is there a limitation that it needs to be within your vicinity, or could it be at a distance? Could you create large rocks just hanging in the sky that once they're created, then they just drop on an enemy, all right? So, yeah, creating things, just, can you create explosive chemicals? Well, not, but even then, like, how explosive? It depends if they have chemical technology in the setting. But conjuring the weapons and equipment, and what about conjuring food? Because supply chains are such a problem in warfare. But if you can create that and you don't need to take it with you, that would give an army an incredible advantage. Just more stuff to consider. We've talked about so much magic, and we haven't even mentioned something that would be incredibly potent, healing. Healing. Now, it depends if everyone could heal, like, what would be the limits? Can you only heal them a certain number of times? Is there a limit of magical power or volume? And so, like, if you have a larger army, you could only heal everyone once. But if you have an army half the size, you can heal them twice. But I'd still probably give the advantage to the larger army. Can they heal themselves? Is it a type of regeneration or is it instant? All these things need to be considered. But if both sides can kind of heal themselves to the same level, to me that would just extend the length and duration of the battle engagement, not necessarily make it decisive for one or the other. But of course, if one side is able to heal and the other isn't, and that would also affect the kind of breaking and the morale issues and stuff, because people don't want to die. But if they know that they can survive because of magical healing vastly more without it, obviously, that means I feel would be more willing to risk more, like they'd risk more in the engagements and be less likely to break because of fear or worry that they're going to be injured or killed, because healing, and what level of healing? Are we talking about resurrection? Like all these things should be considered, because this is incredibly potent stuff that would affect how warfare was conducted vastly, especially with how it operates. That's what you need to really nail down. How is the magic done? Okay, what's causing it? Where is it coming from? Is there limitations or the amounts? Okay, or the limitation of the amount of spells you can cast, or volume, or magical energies, or whatever. When those things are defined, you can more accurately figure out, okay, how could we employ it in war? How would it be logically employed in warfare? Because we humans, we're very creative people, all right? And if we love to exploit things as much as possible for our benefit, that's perfectly fine. But that also means in warfare, if there's any new technology created, us humans will start to try and explore, okay, how can we kill each other with it? Unfortunately, or at least defend each other. And sometimes defense, you need to kill the evil aggressor. But still, that's what we figure. It's one of the very common things we always look at. And magic would be no exception. Even a seemingly combative spell, just how non-combative? Like levitation. Is it not? Well, really, levitate rocks and drop them on someone, right? Healing. It's healing. You know, it's to help people. It doesn't inflict damage at all, but employing it in healing the troops of an army, right? And so nearly any spell, not nearly, well, like a lot of spells can be used in a warfare scenario, and some more potently than others. And if it can be, average humans, most humans, like all the time, will figure out or ask how can it be done, and that's why we need to do it in storytelling as well. Because otherwise, sometimes there's a technology that is created up in either fiction, fantasy, science fiction, whatever, and they're only using it for one thing, and you're like, they would obviously use it for this application, especially if it has combative warfare applications, of course, like teleportation in sci-fi, right? This is one of the reasons I love Stargate SG-1 for a lot of reasons. But one of the cool things, like, they eventually get teleportation technology. And so you know what they do in some instances? They start teleporting bombs into the enemy spacecraft and blowing them up. Because obviously, right? It's teleportation. Star Trek never did, or rarely ever did that, but it's so crazy potent. Oh, of course, shield, block it, right? But as soon as the shield is down, and shields lower in Star Trek combat all the time, instead of shooting a photon torpedo at it, teleport a photon torpedo into the middle of the engine room and just blow it up. Okay? So, and they never do it in Star Trek. And it's baffling. So when you have something that can have a logical application, because people would obviously do it, that's why it's important to think about these things, especially with magic, but a lot of what we've been talking about also applies to science fiction technology. Now, as I mentioned, there are so many examples that I can't cover, which is why I would love to hear your suggestions in the comments below. What is an interesting or creative use of a magical spell that might be very common, but has vastly greater applications in a larger scale warfare, or just in combat generally? Usually spells that aren't even considered to be very offensive can have incredible effects combatively, like that portal thing. They think the portal is about transportation. No, if it can chop off limbs when closing, that's a devastatingly useful thing for combat and warfare. And there are many examples. I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Please do share them. And I hope you have enjoyed this discussion to just try and help us see ways that we can think outside the box to explore ways magic can be employed on the large scale. So thank you for watching. I hope to see you on the next video here on Shadowversity, or check out some of the videos that I mentioned here, like Knights versus Wizards. Hope to see you there, and until that time, farewell.